Hello and welcome to the channel. In this video I'm going to show you how to paint one of the Purge, the adversaries from Core Space, the miniatures tabletop game by Battle Systems. We're going to focus on just one of the miniatures today, and that's the Harvester, the beautiful beige robot who's ready to suck out your brains. It's a simple miniature with a simple colour scheme. We're only going to need a couple of paints to do it, and I'm going to try to show you how to do it using the cheapest stuff available. You're going to need a paintbrush, some paint. I'm using cheap crafters paint, Royal and Langnickel. It's about £1.50 a bottle. I ended up not using the yellow, but I did also use a red, a blue and a dark brown. Some water in whatever container you've got, and something to put your paint on. I'm just using a plastic lid here. Finally, a piece of kitchen towel, which is going to help me to clean up my brush and mop up any spills. I'll be using two paintbrushes today. This one is a fresh new one, maybe cost £1 or £2. It's a nylon brush, and you can see it's got a nice sharp tip at the moment. This is my other brush. This is what all brushes look like eventually, and I'm going to use this for base coating, throwing colours on, that kind of thing. We're also going to have to hold our miniature so we don't get our fingerprints all over it. I'm using a bit of blue tack and just the top of one of my paint pots, and that'll hold it nicely and allow me to move it around while I'm painting. Okay, so the first step is to get some paint onto our miniature, and I've got it on the palette first actually. The paint straight out of the pots is not great, not really ready to use, so just a couple of little spots of water in it help it to flow a little bit more smoothly onto the miniature. I'm going to start off with a base coat. You can use an undercoat, a proper undercoat or a primer. I'm just using this black paint. I want to try and get it on so it goes in all the nooks and crannies, brushing carefully. I don't want to put too much on. It's better to have a thin coat than a thick one that takes ages to dry and clogs up all the detail. You can see it's pretty thin, and I've got patches of plastic coming through from underneath, but don't worry about that. Once you've finished, let it dry, and then you can see if you're going to need to put another coat on. In this case, definitely. And here it is with its second coat of paint, ready to go. So I need to get my base colours on now, and I'm going to start off with, well, it's called taupe. It's like a beigey colour really. It's watered down a little bit. I'm not slopping it on. I'm putting it on a little bit at a time so I can see how it goes. Just working on the areas of the armour. I'm trying to leave as much of that black metal stuff underneath, just black as I possibly can, so I don't have to paint it again afterwards. Just keeping smooth layers going on here, just picking out those parts of the armour. Once it's done, we'll have a look again and see if it needs a second coat. So here it is with the first coat done, and you can see it's looking pretty patchy. The head's looking not very good, and there's bits of colour onto the black undercoat. So I did it again. Second coat looks much nicer, much cleaner. There's still some mess on the black, but we can sort that out fairly easily. Now, if you wanted to, you could just leave it there. It's good enough, to be honest. It's got some colour on it, better painted than not, and it'll look fine on the table. But let's see if we can take it a step further. I'm mixing up a wash now. That's just paint and a load of water. I'm trying to find a darkish brown colour so I can get that into the cracks on the miniature. Now you might be looking at that thinking, that is not a dark brown, that looks like rust. And you'd be right. It wasn't until I put it on though that I realised it doesn't really look that great. But I carried on, and I carried on, and I kept going, and I thought it'll look fine once it's all covered, but yeah, it really doesn't. So that's when the kitchen towel came out. About 5 minutes of cleaning and a bit more cleaning and a wet brush and some more cleaning. Eventually I got it looking sort of okay, and most of that orange colour was back off it. You can see I'm just dabbing away the last few bits. So what I decided to do was mix up a darker brown colour, and that was really just adding black into that existing mix. And here it goes. Just brushing it on. Straight away it looks nicer. It's making the shadows pop a little bit, and it's filling in all of those lines in between the armour panels, giving us some nice separation. There it is. It does look a little bit dark still though, so I think what I need to do now is go back in and add some highlights by using my original taupe colour. Just brushing it on the high points really, looking at where the light might fall, tops of the knees, tops of the head, shoulders, top of the arms, that kind of thing, but leaving all the shadow areas as much as possible. You can see here, picking out little bits, just carefully using the tip of that brush. And with the armour looking a bit brighter, I can go in now and start to put in some of the nice details, like the lights on its chest and the glowing bits on the gun. Now this section is going back in to get the darker bits a little bit darker. I've mixed some even wetter paint with a little bit more black in it, and I'm just trying super carefully to brush in some of the armour panel lines. Now this is the final step on the armour. I used that same taupe colour, but got some white, mixed it in to make a highlight, and just went in again on those real high points, just picking out again the tops of the knees, little lines on the arms, the top of the head, a little bit around the eyes, just to try to get a bit more contrast between the really bright highlight white bits on the armour and the shadows at the bottom. So I tried to keep these to small areas, not overdoing it too much. I'm using really small brush strokes here. In fact, they're more taps than strokes, just touching on to try to get a tiny bit of that paint so that it doesn't fall into the cracks and it just sits on those highlight areas. So now the black areas were still looking a bit flat, so I've come in with some grey. It's almost straight out of the pot, a little bit of water to help it flow, and I'm looking for edges to make these black sections stick out. It's easy just to run your brush along those edges and let the shape of the miniature do the work for you. You can see that on these black pipes at the back of the legs, and it makes them look a little bit nicer rather than just black triangles. Finally, tiny dots of white just to highlight any lighter areas. And finally, it's time to paint the base. All my core space miniatures get the same flat grey base. Now here I'm not using the paint that I'd usually use, I'm just using this grey crafter's paint, and it is pretty thin. You can see there, that's me going in with my second coat, and you can see there's still black patches left on the base. In fact, 2 coats wasn't enough. This was the 3rd coat to try to get that nice flat grey base. And there it is, paint job done. Base done, colours done, armour separation is looking good. You can see all the details. I'd be pleased with that on the table. And I'm really pleased considering the paints and the brushes that I've used. That does still look a bit shiny though, and the paint is quite thin. Some of it was rubbing off as I was using it. So what I really need to do now is give it some protection. And this is what I like to use, Montana Matte Clear Varnish. It's always worked well for me, gives me a good protected coat over the top. And I would spray that outside because using a rattle can is full of not very nice things. It does give you not a perfect matte finish, you get a slightly satin finish on it. So what I really prefer is AK Ultra Matte. You can put it through an airbrush. In this case, I'm just brushing it straight on. You don't want to put it on too thick, but it does a beautiful job of taking the shine off. As you can see here, that is now done. So I hope you found that useful. Let me know in the comments if you did. In the next part, I'll take a look at faster ways of painting, maybe using contrast paints or inks. In the meantime, I'll leave you with these glamour shots.